Let me take you to February 2nd, Wiley, Texas, 20 miles north of Dallas. A 16-year-old sophomore at Wiley East High School trying to get through lunch. He'd already had a year that would have broken most adults. As a freshman, he decided to start a Republican student club on campus. Simple enough, right? He found his 10 members. He found a teacher willing to sponsor. He found a room to meet. He submitted everything. The school came back and said no. Too political. He pushed back. He filed appeals. He argued. He eventually got the approval, and then watched a school principal get caught tearing down their posters anyway. That was his year. That was the system he was working inside. But on this particular Tuesday in February, something on the other side of the cafeteria stopped him cold. 4 adult women. Not students, not teachers. Outside visitors set up at a booth during school lunch hours, handing out copies of the Quran to students, each one with a card in the back explaining exactly how to convert to Islam. Handing out hijabs, distributing pamphlets with the title, Understanding Sharia. No parental consent form sent home. No advance notice. Administrators present, standing right there. Nobody stopped it. So he pulled out his phone, filmed it, and posted it to social media. And the country paid attention. His name is Marco Hunter Lopez, 16 years old, president of the Republican Student Club at Wiley East High School outside Dallas. And what happened next? First to Marco personally, and then inside a federal hearing room in Washington, D.C., is something every parent in America should know about. But here's what the viral clip never showed. There's one part of this story nobody is connecting to what you watched. And it changes everything about what that moment actually was. So here's what Marco Hunter Lopez actually testified to Congress about. Because that clip of him and Raskin, that was about 20 seconds of a much larger story. When Marco walked up to that microphone on May 13th, he wasn't just talking about one booth on one Tuesday. He laid out a pattern. And it's the kind of documented, specific, on-the-record pattern that's very hard to argue with once you see it. The Why Islam materials that were handed out at Wiley East weren't generic informational pamphlets. The Qurans being distributed came with a Shahada card on the final page. His written testimony quoted it directly. To become a Muslim, one needs to make the following declaration. I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. That was in the hands of high school students. During school hours, without any parental consent, without any advance notice to families, with school administrators standing in that cafeteria watching it happen and doing nothing. Now here's where it gets interesting, because you might be asking, what was Marco's own club going through at the exact same time? When the Republican Student Club wanted to bring in a guest speaker, a state representative, a sitting congressman, they were required to submit weeks of advance paperwork, background checks, formal approval processes. How much scrutiny did the Why Islam group face before setting up in the same school? Marco's answer under oath, none. None, from what I know. And the double standard doesn't stop at one booth. According to Hunter Lopez's formal written testimony to Congress, his school district now offers halal meals in the cafeteria, a dedicated prayer room for Islamic religious observances. The Quran is available in the library at McMillan Junior High, but no Bible is offered there. The Republican Student Club? Initially denied on the grounds that it was too political, even though groups promoting gender-affirming ideology were approved and operating on the same campus. When they finally did get approval after months of back and forth, principals were later caught taking down their posted announcements. That's what Marco brought to Congress. Not a grievance. A documented, specific, itemized account of differential treatment at a Texas public school, backed by his own testimony and his own recordings. The Wiley Independent School District said communications could and should have been better. That's an acknowledgement, on record. But what Marco couldn't have known was that the same institutional machinery working against him in Wiley wasn't finished. Because waiting for him in Washington was someone who had spent his entire congressional career building the infrastructure to make sure arguments like Marco's never gained traction, and who had a very powerful platform to use against a 16-year-old on national television. That man was Jamie Raskin, Maryland's 8th Congressional District, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. And he had a strategy for this hearing that was pretty transparent if you watched the setup. His opening question wasn't really a question, it was a frame. He asked the panelists whether anyone believed the United States needed special laws addressing any particular religious population. Classic setup, designed to make the entire hearing look like targeted bigotry rather than a legitimate constitutional discussion. He was building a trap. Then he called on Marco, and Marco didn't walk into the trap. He reframed the entire premise. "I think you keep referring to secular law," he told Raskin. "I think it's important to point out, I believe it was 56 of the 57 Declaration of Independence signers were Bible-believing, faith church-attending Christians. I believe it was the first original 13 colonies that required a declaration of faith." Raskin pivoted immediately. Jefferson described in the letter to Danbury Baptist. Marco didn't let him finish. "That's a letter, not a law." Stop right there, because that's a 16-year-old high school sophomore telling a 25-year constitutional law professor that he's citing a private letter as if it were legal authority. Not a court ruling, not a statute, a letter, written by one man, to a Baptist association in Connecticut. Raskin's entire counter-argument, the one he'd prepared, the one designed to flatten a teenager on national television, collapsed in 6 words. So Raskin escalated. "So your position is that America is a theocracy?" That's not a rebuttal. That's a straw man. Marco never said anything about theocracy. He said Congress should acknowledge America's Christian heritage. Those are not the same sentence. Marco shot back. "You didn't let me finish my original statement. What I am saying is we need to acknowledge—" Raskin cut him off again. Here's what Raskin kept interrupting Marco from being able to say. Marco had already noted that the Declaration of Independence, the document that Thomas Jefferson himself wrote, mentions God 4 times. Laws of nature and of nature's God. Endowed by their Creator. Supreme Judge of the world. Divine Providence. Raskin's response: "The Constitution is the governing body." As if you can simply set aside the founding document of the nation because it's inconvenient. As if the same Jefferson Raskin was citing didn't write a document that opens with "the laws of nature and of nature's God." The clip hit over 1 million views on X in days. People saw exactly what happened. A congressman tried to bully a teenager out of a historical fact, and the teenager didn't flinch. But here's the thing about Raskin's approach in that room. This wasn't a neutral constitutional scholar asking honest questions. And understanding who he actually is explains why he couldn't let Marco finish, and points directly to someone else whose words were conspicuously absent from his entire argument. Someone who knew the founders personally, someone who wrote to Jefferson himself. So who is Jamie Raskin, really? Not the cable news version, the documented version. Because this matters. Jamie Raskin is the co-founder and co-chair of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. He established it in April 2018, along with 3 other Democratic representatives. The caucus's own mission statement says it was created in reaction to the influence of religion, especially that of the Christian right, in public policymaking. Its explicit purpose is to protect the secular character of our government by adhering to the strict constitutional principle of the separation of church and state. Raskin didn't just agree with this mission. He built it. His name is on the founding documents. And his secular credentials go further. He received the Secular Coalition for America's National Visibility Award at their 2017 annual dinner. He received the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Clarence Darrow Award, an organization that describes itself as fighting for the constitutional principle that church and state must remain separate. When the Freedom from Religion Foundation hands you an award, you are not a neutral observer on questions about America's religious founding. You are the institutional representative of one side of that argument. That's who walked into that hearing room on May 13th, not a disinterested constitutional scholar. The officially recognized champion of organized American secularism. A man with 25 years of constitutional law professorship, 2 institutional awards from anti-religious influence organizations, and a congressional caucus he personally co-founded to fight exactly the kind of argument Marco Hunter Lopez was making. And he still couldn't answer the question. He couldn't engage the 56 of 57 claim historically, couldn't cite a countersource, couldn't engage the founding documents directly. Instead, he cited a private letter as constitutional authority, accused a teenager of advocating theocracy, and spent 2 minutes cutting him off. Fox News media critic Joe Concha said it plainly on X. Raskin is used to dealing with anchors on CNN and MSNBC who don't call him on his bullshit. And Hunter Lopez at just 16 shows that he has far more maturity and intelligence than all of them. Marco's own response afterward: "I believe that he thinks that he was going to catch me off guard by calling me out, but it didn't. I took the fight." Raskin's office did not respond to Fox News Digital's request for comment after the clip went viral. 1 million views, no response. And here's what nobody has asked yet. If Raskin's position is that the founders were secularists, why didn't he quote them? Why didn't he pull out John Adams? Why didn't he cite the founders directly instead of retreating to a private letter? The answer may be that the founders themselves wrote something that would have ended that argument before it started. There is one man, someone Raskin himself cited as an authority, who put it in writing, clearly, directly, to Thomas Jefferson. That man was John Adams, the second president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson's co-author, one of the most central figures of the American founding. And on June 28, 1813, in a private letter to Thomas Jefferson himself, Adams wrote this: "The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity." That's not a conservative commentator. That's not a modern historian with an agenda. That's John Adams, in a letter to the same Jefferson that Raskin cited, confirming exactly what Marco Hunter Lopez stood up in Congress and said. The general principles of the founding were the general principles of Christianity. In Adams's own words, written to Jefferson. 2. And it wasn't just Adams. The Declaration of Independence, the document Jefferson co-authored with Adams and the full Continental Congress, opens by invoking the laws of nature and of nature's God. It describes rights as being endowed by their creator. It appeals to the supreme judge of the world and closes with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. 4 separate references to God. In the founding document, written by the same Jefferson whose private letter Raskin tried to use to shut a teenager up, Raskin quoted the Danbury letter as if it overrides the Declaration, but the Declaration wasn't a letter. It was a founding document signed by 56 men, ratified by the Continental Congress, and transmitted to the world as the official statement of what this country is. And it mentions God 4 times. Marco's argument was not a fringe position. It was the documented historical record. Now put all of this together. A Texas public school lets adult women hand out Islamic conversion materials to minors without parental consent, denies a conservative student club for being too political, and offers a dedicated prayer room and halal meals while keeping no Bible in the library. When Marco documents and exposes that, he goes viral and gets death threats. And then a congressman who built a career on fighting Christian conservative influence in government spends 2 minutes trying to silence him on national television, while the founders themselves, including the very man Raskin cited, back up everything Marco said. Marco knew all of that when he walked in. He said it himself. I took the fight. But there's still one piece of this story that the viral clip didn't show. Something Marco was carrying into that room that has nothing to do with history books or constitutional arguments. And when you hear it, it puts everything you just watched in a completely different light. Before Marco Hunter Lopez sat down at that microphone in Washington, he had already received death threats. He testified to this under oath before the same subcommittee where Raskin spent 2 minutes cutting him off. His exact words: I had people saying that they were going to be at my house waiting for me to get home and they were going to shoot me. I had people telling me to kill myself. A lot of different things. But I know nobody can proclaim anything over me because I wake up every morning with victory with Christ. That is what this 16-year-old was carrying when Jamie Raskin asked him to yield the floor. He didn't receive those threats for committing a crime. He received them for filming a booth at his own school and posting the video online. For noticing something. For being a kid who paid attention. And then, knowing what people had said they would do to him, he flew to Washington, sat down in a federal hearing room, and made his argument anyway, while a congressman with 25 years of constitutional law on his resume kept interrupting him. Here is what this story actually is. A public school system looked the other way while adults handed out Islamic conversion materials to minors with no parental consent. When Marco exposed it, he was threatened. When he went to Congress, he was bullied by the institutional champion of the secular left, a man who has received awards from atheist organizations and co-founded a congressional caucus explicitly to fight Christian conservative influence in government. And through all of it, the historical record, the founder's own words, including John Adams writing to Jefferson himself, backed everything Marco said. You now know more about what actually happened in that hearing room than most people who watched the clip on X. Here's the verdict. A 16-year-old from a Dallas suburb walked into Congress under death threats, cited the founders from memory, got cut off 6 times, and still didn't back down. That is not a debate about religion. That is a country getting to see what happens when someone who hasn't learned yet that you're supposed to be quiet doesn't stay quiet. If you want to catch the next breakdown the moment it drops, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. And drop a comment below. What was the moment in this video where it clicked for you? A kid in a school lunchroom, a phone, a booth nobody was supposed to notice. He noticed, and he didn't stop.